So today I begin my studying of the concept of consciousness. And this is the first day. Today is Tuesday, May 25. All right. So as usual, at the beginning, I find the definition of the concept on Longman Dictionary. Consciousness. Consciousness. Then I find the definition on Urban Dictionary. Consciousness. Then I go on etymology.com and find the root of the word and from where it come from. So consciousness. And also I look at Wikipedia page. So consciousness, I guess, yeah, Wikipedia, and beyond that, I go at Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Okay, I missed it. Stanford Encyclopedia Philosophy. Yeah, and when there are articles about the concepts which I study on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, I usually prefer to read them from here, from this encyclopedia instead of Wikipedia. But on Wikipedia, I'd like to check the definition and just compare it with other definitions. So, by the way, there was some kind of work which I already done. So I prepared 16 questions. 16 questions for the discussion. And it was just brainstorming. So I sat in my bed and was thinking for 30 minutes about anything related to consciousness and tried to figure out what kind of questions may be interesting to discuss at the speaking club. Well, I'm going to read all these questions before I get to the definitions. How did consciousness come to existence? Is life possible without consciousness? What is the main function of consciousness? Why do we have consciousness? Do other creatures have consciousness? Is consciousness an individual or a social phenomenon? Will robots have consciousness in the future? Is there any difference between consciousness, mind, and soul? May consciousness be personal? Is consciousness mortal? Are there some creatures with higher consciousness? Can consciousness be higher or lower? Is there any way to use consciousness? Why is it worth to study the concept of consciousness? Who are the most significant living experts in consciousness? Are language and consciousness interconnected? So these are 16 questions. And I hope that while doing my studies during this week, I'll answer them and will understand how to, use these questions to build a great conversation. Anyway, let's start from the definition here on Longman Dictionary. There are four definitions. So the first one is the condition of being awake and able to understand what is happening around you. So it's basically the synonym of wakefulness. It's like you are asleep or you are unconscious, and this is the position of being asleep or unconscious. All right, it's quite simple, doesn't require any comment. Your mind and your thoughts. So this is a little bit more complicated because what is the mind and what are the thoughts? But anyway, so mind and thoughts. The third definition, someone's ideas, feelings, or opinions about politics, life, etc. Okay, it's like some knowledge, and I'm not sure what is meant by, why it's about politics, life, etc. It's like, does it about everything? Is it about everything, or okay? Let's just keep it in mind. Like, there's ideas and feelings about something, and it's also like consciousness. Oh, it's like your mind, but basically, it's more about opinions and politics. Opinions and feelings and ideas. Anyway, when you know that something exists or is true, awareness. Yeah, I guess the third and fourth definitions are kind of confused, so I can't understand exactly what is meant here. Like ideas, feelings, and opinions, but why it's like about politics and life? Can consciousness be someone else's opinion about art or about death, or anything? It's like politics, lives, etc. What kind of category uh, is that? Politics and life. And the fourth definition, when you know that something exists, there is true awareness. Well, I understand awareness is like being aware of something. It's like being conscious of a certain fact. So it's like an adjective. So when you say, I am conscious of it, it's the same way as to say, I am aware of it. So I am aware that I make mistakes. So I'm conscious of my mistakes when I speak English. Yeah, I guess it's quite understandable. But this one, yeah, I have some difficulties with understanding the third definition, but it's not so important. So let's go on. There are some collocations. Lose consciousness, go into a type of deep sleep that is not normal. Regain, recover consciousness, wake up, return to consciousness, bring somebody back to consciousness, drift in and out of consciousness, be awake and then not wake, and then awake again. It's like you fall asleep, then you wake up, and then you fall asleep. I mean, not for a long time at night, but when you listen to some stupid lesson, like, for example, you may watch me and drift in and out of consciousness. Yeah, it's like funny idiom. Lots of people, when they, come to the speaking club, drift in and out of consciousness. When I observe them, they may just, it seems they're here, but they're not aware of what's going on. So they're like lose the track of the discussion. Anyway, so this is one thing. Let's go on. Urban dictionary consciousness. There is supposed to be a funny definition. Let's try to find out, is it true or not. The infinite awareness of the present. So there's kind of spiritual definition, the infinite awareness of the present. Let's read a long one. To have a better understanding of consciousness, you need to pay attention only to what is right here, right now, in front of you. All right. So it's like when you don't think about past and future, when you are present. The present is not the now. The now is what is and is timeless. The now is what is and is timeless. There is no need to be concerned with the remembered past or the anticipated future. They exist only as they are imagined. Yeah, the whole idea is that even if you're thinking about the future or the past, you are thinking about it in the present moment. And from this perspective, yeah, it may be misinterpreted. I mean, this phrase may be misinterpreted in a way that there's no need to be concerned with the remembered past or the anticipated future. They exist only as they are imagined. So if somebody who is unfamiliar with spiritual jargon reads this definition, this sentence, he or she may think that there is no need to think about past and there's no need to think about future because they're not real. But in reality, it's obviously like a silly statement. So your past, whatever you're thinking about right now, if it's in the past, if you try to remember something, if you try to keep track of your experience and your evolution, whatever, your ideas, this is you are doing it right now, and there are certain importance in doing that, and you shouldn't dismiss it and say like it's useless and future is useless. Be present. Be present doesn't mean that you always experience what's around you and don't think about anything else. Be present means that you are aware of what's going on in your mind, in your consciousness, so that you know that even if you are thinking about the past, it's not in the past. Your thoughts are in the present moment. And like the past probably is important for you to figure out what's going on right now. And that's why you're thinking about it. Or when you think about the future, it's also like you give more significance to some future event, and you are thinking about it in the present. But this event, it's like we may consider it from kind of position when we meditate. So when we focus our attention on one particular spot, and when we think about the future, and when you give more attention to a certain event in the future, which is more important for you than what's going on right now, since you may have leisure to think about the future. So you may invest more and more energy into this event, or whatever it may be. So you may think about something and fill it with energy, and then when event actually comes out, you'll have more understanding of what's going on, and that you are better prepared for the event. Anyway, yeah, I actually, these kind of ideas which related to the present moment, all this, Eckhart Tolle nonsense about being present. I understand them, but I think they're quite, when you use them for yourself, and when you understand what you're talking about, when you read philosophical books and psychological books, it may be quite beneficial for you. But when you try to teach other people and say, guys, you have to live in the present, and present means this, it's basically not a good way of getting approval from society, since most of the time when whatever you are going to say, people will misinterpret it. And these guys like Eckhart Tolle, these famous gurus who are teaching people on the internet and tell them how to live, what to do, how to be aware. So I can't listen to Eckhart Tolle for more than 10 minutes. Like for me, he's a kind of stupid jerk. And when he always like says things and explains things in this way, I haven't watched a lot of his videos. I watched maybe a few hours. Like the first time I got familiar with Eckhart Tolle, it was, I guess it was somewhere around 2015, 16, when I started studying English. Like I discovered him on the internet, and that time I was reading basically like Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, and I was, what? This is the Osho, yeah. This is the like the modern guru Eckhart Tolle, like living the present, and all these concepts like living in the present. They're like, I guess Heraclitus were thinking and writing about them like 2000 and 500 years ago. I mean, they're not novel. And Eckhart Tolle, like when he tries to present this idea being in present, it's basically Gestalt psychology, and I guess better source of understanding of this concept is what was his name? He wrote a book, Inside and Outside of Trash Basket. What was his name? Pearls. Yeah, Fritz Pearls. There are some lectures on YouTube, Fritz Pearls. So if you are interested, you may watch them. And he basically says the same what Eckhart Tolle says in his videos, but and in his book, The Present, what's the book? The name of the book? Yeah, I've read actually this book in 2018. The Power of Now. Yeah, it's even in this book, he misinterprets everything in a silly manner. So you read the book, if you're gullible and naive person, you'll believe most of what is said in this book, and you won't be able, like you may just get you might get confused about the reality, about yourself, about everything. And when I read the book, I actually published some notes about this book. And I'm going to show you, like, there somewhere it was, wait, it was not this page. It was Volibor Zastavkin page. So Volibor Zastavkin page, let's find Volibor Zastavkin. It was Volibor Zastavkin's page, and on this page here, it was somewhere around, I don't remember exactly, like 200. Let's just check here. 39 Johnson, syphilis, cold fusion, Johnson. Yeah, it's January, so we need to get up, like how long is January, and I need to get to June. So six months, 180 days. It's going to be 410 or something like that. Okay, let's check it out. Oh no, it can be 410 since it's day. Okay, let's check 380. Dickens behavioral biology. No, it's not here. It's a little bit earlier. Somewhere here, 300. No, it's not here. 72. I don't know what was going on here. 71. Why there's no. Oh, okay, at hospital. Yeah, this is when I returned from the sea, and I guess I was reading Eckhart Tolle a little bit like earlier. Where is this damn Eckhart Tolle? 150 hands, back home. Yeah, I got back home from the sea, and then probably I had a conversation a few days. Yeah, Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald, the world as well an idea, Speaking Hub, Jude the Obscure. No, I guess it was even earlier, before I got to the sea. It was June, yeah, somewhere here. Yeah, June, and I was reading them in June 2018. All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. So if you if you are interested in my ideas about Eckhart Tolle, you may just check Volibor Zastavkin and read all his journal from from June, from the beginning of June to the end of August. They're somewhere there, and I basically describe, like, I was reading the book The Power of Now, and I made, I guess, four or five notes in both languages, in English and Russian. So I have this actually on my computer. Yeah, but I'm not sure whether or not I'll be able to find them. No, there's not here. Maybe I put it here. No. Okay, let's do that. Like, next time I'll find it and tell you exactly where it is. But anyway, so let's go on. Consciousness, to be present. Yeah, the whole idea that there's no need to be concerned with the remembered past or the anticipated future. They exist only as they're imagined. So it's maybe considered as deep, but actually it's a very superficial way of looking at reality. Disengage from time-oriented thinking to free yourself from needless worry and distraction from what is. Stay in the present moment. It's basically a kind of Eckhart Tolle oriented definition, and it's like spiritual definition. And yeah, if you know well what's going on there, you may, it's like it may have certain advantages for you to consider everything from the present moment, but it's just the half of the picture. So the second half is that there's no present. So present is basically an illusion, and there's only past and there's only future. Whenever you are like, say, like, yeah, I am present, you don't understand what's going on, since present it's like you can't touch it, you can't find it, you can't point it out. So present isn't there. There's only past and there's only the future. And the gap between them, like, this is the illusion, right? But two types of interpretations, of course, so we may argue about it. I mean, I may just argue from both perspectives. I may say, yeah, there's only present, and you have to exist in this particular moment, and everything else is unimportant. And I may basically talk about it for a couple of hours and say why it's true. And then I may say, if there is no present, there is only past and the future. And if you are living in present, it's like you are completely delusional and you don't know what's going on. And you are brainwashed by stupid idiots who just manipulate you to have certain advantages from you. It's like, when I was a kid, I bought these ideas of, living present, past and future don't make any sense, and die young, experience everything in life, don't think about anything, don't try to think seriously, be present, like drink Pepsi or whatever. Yeah, and then later in my life, when I grew older, when I became 20 something, 20, I guess 22, yeah, I started studying like literature, philosophy, poetry. And I realized that the first 20 years were not the first, I guess. I I stuck to the idea of like living in present, maybe at the age of 10 or something. In the beginning, when I got to school, yeah, and like in 90s basically, yeah, and there was like in 90s, it was very hard to properly orient yourself in the world when you are 10 years, like not 10, like 6 7 year old boy in 90s in Russia. That was kind of difficult. Anyway, so consciousness, the degree in which energy is aware of its properties and other existing properties. Energy is aware. Like, no, they don't use body. There was like, I guess the body may be put in here instead of energy, but they say energy. Okay, spiritual jargon. I may appreciate that, but uh, today I have a different mood. Today I want to criticize everything. From a hermetical view, this would be the proper definition of consciousness. Observe the Emer Emerald tables of Thoth. Thoth, like, who was that? Some ancient god. Yeah, don't remember exactly. I guess it was like Egyptian god. But anyway, and the work of Dran Valo Melchizedek. No, I'm not gonna observe tables of Thoth and Melchizedek. It's not what I'm gonna waste my time on. Though they may be relevantly important for studying the concept of consciousness, but I don't want to study it from spiritual point of view. I want to study it from kind of materialistic point of view or scientific point of view. Consciousness. Since I know almost everything about the term when it's considered from spiritual point of view. So in many times when I have discussions about consciousness, when I have to talk about it, I find myself speaking mostly about this spiritual idea that consciousness, it's everything and we are just part of it, and this body actually it's just a part of consciousness, and consciousness is primary to our existence as individuals, and if you kind of transcend your identity and take yourself as consciousness instead of like thinking about yourself as body, you become immortal, since there's always experience. So you just get rid of your personal unique view of the world, and you consider everything as just experience. So at that moment, I experience what's going on, like in my room, on the internet. I'm reading some concepts about consciousness. I may look at the window and see some, cars rolling on, and birds flying, and trees growing. And this is unique way of experiencing the world. So nobody else uh, possesses the same experience as I have. But from a consciousness point, like if I consider myself as consciousness, it's like all possible experiences united in one thing. So it's like what I experience right now is just it's just a part of consciousness. So, for example, what you experience when you are listening to me and watching this video and doing studying with me, so this is another way of like experience, and this is also if I consider myself this person, Vladimir Svitashev, and think that I am conscious, and when I, for example, die, it's going to be some, like, there's going to be nothing, or there's be something, whatever, I don't know. If I take this perspective, it's very different from if I take myself as consciousness, like endless consciousness, and consider the world as like just transformation of myself, transformation of consciousness. So if you listen to this video, it's basically if I am using the second perspective, there's no difference between me and you. You just experience the world, and it's like the word "you" means consciousness, and consciousness experience the world through your body, and it's the same consciousness that experience the world through my body and through all these bodies which are present in the internet, or we may call them energies as presented this in a previous concept. And I find myself often talking about this, but I don't really understand what is consciousness from kind of materialistic scientific point of view. And what I want to study today is these ideas, like scientific ideas, some researchers, and that's why I dismiss all these other ideas, since I know them uh, probably better than 99% of people, since I was studying them in depth for a decade, basically. Yeah, and by studying, I mean not just reading books and making some researches, but meditating, studying my stream of consciousness, studying myself, studying like my thoughts and feelings and the different interactions with other people, basically by writing and thinking. Yeah, okay, let's go on. The annoying time between naps. You sleep in and out of it in order to other what you sleep in and out of it to order another drink. My boss was okay. It's like kind of silly way of defining the physically unidentified mechanism that is experience, the foundation of perception, the self, the intangible collection of data obtained by way of the senses, sight, hear, and smell, touch, etc. Yeah, I like this definition. It's kind of scientific one. So it's basically the one which I want to understand better, and the one which I'm familiar with. But when I compare, I can't say that physically unidentified mechanism that is experience. No, in science, it should be identified to just something that is going on, like something that is produced by our brains. So this experience, which I have, whatever I see the world, it's something that emerges out of the activity of neurons. And from the perspective of neurophysiology, it's the consciousness is going to be, again, it's not unidentified mechanism. It's just a certain something that is produced by brain anyway. Yeah, and I want to understand deeper that. So I don't want to like experience this mysticism and these ideas which kind of foggy, and those which we may argue about endlessly. So someone says this, someone says that, and there's no real way of understanding. Whereas in science, at least there's going to be like something that we can all agree upon and say, okay, consciousness is something that brain produces and experience. But what is that like, and why it's always different? And yeah, but anyway, this is not an easy concept. This is not an apple which grows on trees. And you may say, an apple is grows on trees, and we all can see it, we all can say what it is, we can taste it, right? We can smell it, and we can identify it by pointing it out. And yeah, but that's no, you can't tell a lot about apples, right? So if you want to have a conversation about apples in 5 minutes, there's been nothing to talk about, probably, or at least there has been nothing exciting to talk about. Whereas consciousness, there are so many different ideas, so many people who studied the subject, so many people who dedicated their lives to study just one concept, develop it like in many different languages, and comparing different languages, trying to figure out how people understand consciousness, like from different cultures, from different time perspectives. It's so exciting, and there's endless, if I start studying the concept of consciousness, let's say today, and go on for the rest of my life, I won't be able to like to understand it fully. So it's like there's no way to get to the point when you can say, I know everything about consciousness, since it's endless. Consciousness itself is endless. Therefore, studying of it may be also endless. And usually people don't go deep in studying consciousness. I mean, nobody even studies it. Like there are few people on earth. I mean, not few, maybe 100, maybe 1,000, maybe even a million. But what is a million if we compare it with 10 billions? And people don't usually pay attention to consciousness. And it's funny, as soon as you start paying attention, you may see lots of things which may, change your way of perceiving the world, of perceiving yourself, and basically which may transform your life. So if you like your life, probably you don't need to study the concept of consciousness, and that may change it. And if you don't like what's going on, you may study the concept of consciousness, and by going deeper, dedicating more and more time, you may probably discover something that will be crucial for your personal transformation and transformation of your consciousness. If consciousness may be something that may belong to someone. I don't believe in that. For example, I think that, yeah, even if I'm conscious, I still I belong to consciousness rather than consciousness belongs to me. All right, so let's just read it. The truth of consciousness is that no one knows what it is or where to look for it. Yeah. The truth of consciousness is that no one knows what it is and what it is or where to look for it. The brain physically responds to the same actual experience as it does to imagined experience, but the conscious mind is aware of the difference between the actual and imagined. Yeah, like for my brain, there is no difference in, let's say, thinking about a tiger and imagining a tiger and seeing a real tiger. No, there is a difference. Yeah, my brain knows the difference since, yeah, like imagined tiger doesn't make me feel afraid. Whereas a real tiger is going to be here right now, I'll probably like be eaten. But before I'm going to be eaten, I'm going to be terrified immediately. But when you think about some, let's say you practice martial arts, and for your brain to remember, like you may practice martial arts in your imagination. Yeah, I mean, you can, of course, it's like you won't go far if you're going to practice it only in your imagination, but if you're going to think about it a lot and practice it in real world, it's going to help you to develop the martial arts skills way better than if you just practice it in real world. I mean, thinking and consciousness and your mind, like for it, there's no big difference. For example, when I study language, right? So I may really study it. I may read books. I may listen to some, videos, to some people who are talking English, or I may write something down. I may speak myself, and I also may think and imagine something, describing it in English. And this is also like the way of studying it, like thinking. And I might give an example of playing video games. So for me, I never was a professional player, but I spent many years in my childhood and in my teens playing video games. And I would say that, well, I was one of the best players when I played in StarCraft and WarCraft. Like in the local level, there was very few people who can match to the level I was playing. Just few people on the local level, and I developed my skills not only by playing, since I didn't have access to play as much time as I could, but by thinking about games. So I played in my imagination probably even more games than I was playing in like in real time. Whenever I was no, most of the time I was thinking about video games. So I tried to, and it wasn't kind of verbal thinking. Then now I can see that at that time I wasn't even aware that I may think verbally. I may think, verbalize my thoughts. I was, basically imagining like, okay, there's like, let's talk about StarCraft. So there's like, I usually play it for Zergs, and I was thinking, okay, I start a game, and if I'm playing against Protoss, like what should I build? And I may do this, I may do that. Last time I did that, it didn't work. Why didn't work? And it's like all this. No, I didn't use language for that, but I was trying to imagine like the sequences of building army, the sequences of building, you know, Zerlings. No, there was Zerlings. Zerlings, it was fighting units, but there was drones. Yeah, drones. They were like units which gathered minerals. And yeah, I mean, like thinking, there's like, if you want to improve your skill of playing video games, it depends more on your thinking rather than on your actual playing. So if you, let's say, play an hour a day and think about it another hour, you will grow faster and play better than you just play for 2 hours. And I guess it's almost with everything. So recently, for example, it was 2018. No, it was 2019. It was 2019, and I decided to study chess. So I couldn't quit playing video games completely. And I decided that I would play chess instead of playing some stupid games, which I was kind of addictive to. I mean, I couldn't, like chess, I could control it. I mean, I could play like few games, 5 games, and then I can stop. Whereas when I was playing my games, like in Warcraft, Heroes Third, whatever else I play, StarCraft, some other maps in Warcraft, like Dota, whatever, I couldn't control it. I just start playing, and I may play for 10, 15 hours every day for a week, for 2 weeks. And I realized when I started studying the concept of, when I started studying chess, I realized I wanted to play better. And I started thinking about chess. And I realized that just thinking gives me more advantages. It gives me more understanding of the game than the game itself. So even though I wanted like to play more than to think about it, I tried to reconstruct all games in my mind, to remember like all of them, how they went from the beginning to the end, especially some important games which were kind of, where I lost. And I didn't think about all games which I lost, but I thought about many of them. Yeah, let me show you. There is my chess journal. Here it is. And it gradually became a journal where I was writing about the speaking club, which I started conducting at Innovation Cultural Center. So the first this journal was used to, and there was topics which we covered, like Yeah, and I was like writing topics down here, but the first it was used to study chess. So it's like different games, another game, like another game. So I was analyzing like many games which I played back in the days, and also I was thinking about them, playing in my mind, and there's almost no difference, like in the real play, like playing in real time, in like in the real world, or playing in your imagination. And yeah, in the same way I was studying like the games played by professional players, by Carlos Magnus, Nakamura. Like I memorized their games, and I've noticed that my skill started growing fast. And again, I developed passion to play in chess. And then I decided I'm not going to go in this direction. Since, I learned to play like in a few months after I started studying it and thinking about the concept, like all these concepts. I realized about chess, I realized that, it may just be something like video game. I mean, I can become as addictive as to chess, and I don't want to go deeper in this direction. So since I use chess just to distract myself from excessive studying of language. And yeah, in my way, when I study English, and I often emphasize that I study to think. Like I'm studying not for a certain purpose, but I learn to think in English, and thinking itself for me is a purpose. And whenever I think, I really have this experience of growing and learning language. And whenever like I do something, whenever I use the language, it's almost there's like for me, I basically use the experience like this in this time when I communicate with people, or when I write, or when I read something. I use it to develop my thoughts. So for me, thinking is prior to the real experience. So lots, people, for example, many people say that you have to have a certain purpose. Like if you think, what are you thinking about? What's the purpose? Why do you need to think? And they consider thinking as a tool for achieving their goals. And I do the opposite. So for me, thinking is prior, and everything else is just most of the time, not always, of course, but most of the time, thinking is the like something that everything I do to think better. So everything I do in my life, for example, studying language, conducting the speaking club, reading books, watching videos, watching lectures, doing this stream, studying stream, I do it to get amazing thoughts afterwards. So I know that, for example, I do this exercise, I may say lots of silly things. I may not be able to understand everything that I'm going to read. I may not be able to talk about it wisely. But I know that afterwards I'll have amazing thoughts. And these thoughts is like, this is uh, for my mind and for my consciousness more important than just having experience. So for me, experience, like imaginary experience, is kind of prior to real experience, even though I may differentiate between them. But I've spent lots of time like in real experience. And imaginary experience for me like plays you know higher role. So I prefer to live in the world of imagination. Though it's like, yeah, of course, I try to match them both, and not go far in my imagination that I'm just a deluded person who believes in something completely ridiculous, which is totally useless. Yeah, like imagine a world. I mean, you build some ideas, you build some uh, castles in the air, right? But you also may build something real. So you may like exactly. And what I'm doing, it's more. No, recently I came up with this idea. I wouldn't say that I didn't think about it before, but recently it became kind of strong, and I can articulate it easier. So the idea is basically that I'm a determinist, and for me, as a determinist, like there's no difference between past and future. It's all kind of predetermined. And whatever I do, like my purpose is not to, think about the future and transform it. My purpose is to understand what's going on right now, to understand myself and to understand the world and be able to describe it. And I study language to have to have tools, to have perfect instrument to describe the world which I live in. And for me, like the purpose of life now is just the perfect description, the perfect and accurate description of my experience. And now I find myself thinking more and more about my experience on several levels. So, for example, one level may be that I'm thinking about what's going on right now. So there's some, let's say, experience. Right now I'm working on this article and I am engaged in studying. So, and I'm trying to connect it with the past experience. And sometimes I think about the future, but it's like it's going on in the present. And I'm trying to be aware of what am I doing. And another way for me, like thinking about my experience, is basically understanding what happened before. So, and I have like certain time which I dedicate to this, like certain exercise which I do it almost every day, and these exercises are about like going back in my experience and re-evaluating everything what happened. So I just take, like, let's say 10-20 minutes a day and think about the previous month, and then next day I think about the previous month, and every day I get back and back and back, and I can remember, basically I can keep in my mind like 10 years. So I remember, like, in my experience, not just significant events, but almost everything what happened since I started writing my journals, 2008, but mostly since 2011 when I started writing daily. I remember everything. So, and I keep like my experiences, like my present, it's not what's going on right now, it's what's going on for the last 10 years. And I'm aware of everything what happened. And I evaluate it, like think about it a lot. And, but it's just, a lot means, an hour, maybe 30 minutes a day. It's not like all the time. Of course, the main attention is focused on like what I'm doing at this particular moment. But I also keep in mind, as I said, the previous experience. And for me, like the best way of describing what's going on is kind of purpose. So, and like I understand that I can't control the reality. I can't change anything. I know that the past and future are predetermined, but like, yeah, in my way, it's like it's predetermined in a way that I'm going to become the greatest, writer, and I'm be able to describe exactly my personal experience. And this is the purpose, like to describe it, but not to make something up, just to describe it as it is. And that's fascinating. Anyway, let's go on. The consciousness is operating separate from the brain. Oh, this is a kind of bold claim. Yeah, I wouldn't say that, since there's no evidence. Though, like in the spiritual circles, of course, you may say whatever you like. And as far as I know, you have to have a brain to have experience. So without brain, I don't know. Maybe it's true. But since I'm an individual, and whatever I may say, I if I want it to be true, I have to say that this is my experience, and I have consciousness, and I have body, and I know other people, and they also have brains, and they also have consciousness. But I'm not sure that, like, the argument which I made quite recently, that the table has consciousness. Like, it may have it, I don't know, but I certainly may say that I have it, or it has me. But uh, if we consider consciousness being something which, like, what was the definition? Like the condition of being awake and able to understand what is happening around you. So if we consider consciousness as the condition of being awake and being able to understand what's going on around you, I guess brain is necessary. So the consciousness is operating separate from the brain. It's kind of, now, from a from one point it may be, since we don't know. But if we don't know, is it valid to claim that? So we know that consciousness, like people have consciousness, well, at least it seems so. I have consciousness, since otherwise I won't be able to say anything and to record these videos. And other people probably do also have it, but yeah, maybe I don't have it. I mean, maybe it's just an illusion. But if it's an illusion, it's still like, it's still consciousness, since I'm conscious of having an illusion of consciousness. All right, so perception tells us that the conscious mind resides in our heads, but we cannot identify its physical location. Oh, we can identify its physical location. It's the outside world, right? So it's like perception. Yeah, our brain perceives the world. Yeah, like we might say, it's the world may be ideal, and our brain doesn't perceive the world, since the world is like the thing in itself, and our brain perceives only what it wants to perceive. Yeah, okay, there's some questions. Yeah, but once again, let's see. Perception tells us that the conscious mind resides in our heads. So the mind is in our heads, but we cannot identify its physical location. Yeah, but why we can say that the brain is the location itself, so the nervous system, and the whole system creates this experience, and we know that. And yeah, the point, like, where is it located? Is it located in one certain place, in in your amygdala, or in your hypothalamus, or in your frontal cortex? Well, is it important? Like, we can't identify anything from that point. We can say that everywhere, like, if you take any piece of dust, you may just separate it, and you can, yeah, there's like infinite energy. Okay, let's go on. This brings us to quantum physics. I don't pretend to know anything about quantum physics, but there's this question of where atomic particles are going as they move in and out of existence, as they constantly do. Finally, there is the fact that the large majority of space is vacuum, including all of matter. It's like there are lots of nonsense in this, but yeah, vast majority of space is vacuum. No, it's not vacuum. Vast majority of space is dark energy, but what we understand by that, I have no idea. Okay, let's get further. Apparently, matter is not as solid as it seems. Most of the volume of matter is the vacuum, space between the particles, consistently coming in and out of existence, sometimes seeming to be in two places at one time. Yeah, it's all this dualism, and an observer, and what was the experiment when they proved scientifically that matter may be simultaneously a wave and a particle. But it's nonsense. I mean, watch Sean Carroll's lectures on quantum mechanics to understand it. Yeah, what's written here, it's most of it is just nonsense that make up its mass. Yeah, or maybe I don't understand it, but it seems very superficial way of describing quantum physics. Is consciousness the living what get rid? Is consciousness the living vacuum residing within these biochemical masses of matter? All right, so who knows? All right, let's stop reading definitions on Urban Dictionary, since they're kind of, oh, I like this one, conscience with knowledge. It's not with knowledge, it's common knowledge. Okay, I'll get there right now. Consciousness, the etymology of the word. Internal knowledge from consciousness, meaning state of being aware of what passes in one's own mind. is from 1670s, meaning state of being aware. Like ness is state and conscious, like being aware. Okay, but yeah, there's another word like conscious, which means like conscience. But anyway, of anything is from 1746. Consciousness raising is attested from 1986. All right, like this is one definition. It's basically internal knowledge or the state of being aware what passes in one's own mind. State of being aware. All right. Sentience, subconscious. That's strange. Okay, what would they say about this concept? Constant. Oh man, I put it in constant conscience. Conscious, faculty of knowing what is right. Oh, it's more about like conscientiousness. All right, faculty of knowing what, like these words, consciousness, conscientiousness. They're so confusing. Faculty of knowing what is right, originally, especially to Christian ethics, later awareness that the acts for which one feels responsible do or do not conform to one's ideal of right. Later, more generally, sense of fairness or justice, moral sense. This is from Old French conscience, 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 innermost thoughts, desires, intentions, feelings, and directly from Latin conscientia, a joint knowledge of something, a knowing of a thing together with another person. Consciousness, knowledge. Yeah, this is like idea of consciousness. I mean, in Russian, we have a word сознание, and this is the word is basically a literal translation of conscientia or consciousness, which is like another word for that. And this word also have several meanings. So one meaning is that being aware. So it's like when you use it as an adjective, you basically say that you are aware of something. It's also, there's dichotomy between conscious or consciousness and sleep. So you may be asleep or you may be dead and you may be conscious. A conscious basically also may be considered as being alive as well. But yeah, I'm surprised that they defined it here very shortly without, even saying where this whole idea of consciousness, like, without giving a Latin or Greek root of the word. Yeah, whereas in conscious, yeah, where's Latin? Yeah, here, conscientia, and it's the same concept. Basically, a joint knowledge of something, everything together. Yeah, let's read a little bit further. Abstract noun from conscientem, nomen of conscience, present participle of conscire, be mutually aware, be conscious of wrong. In late Latin, to know well, from a simulated form of com, with or thoroughly, see con, plus scire, to know, probably originally to separate one thing from another, to distinguish, related to scindere, to cut, divide, from pre-root scale, to cut, split. That's strange. Like on one side, it's the word which unites knowledge, and on the other side, it's the word which splits something or divides something, or to distinguish, to separate one thing from the other. The Latin word is probably a long translation of Greek sine eidesis, literally with knowledge. The sense development is perhaps via to know alone with others what is right or wrong, to know right or wrong within oneself, know in one's own mind, consider себе. Sometimes it was nativized in Old English, early Middle English as in wit. Russian also uses a long translation, so vest. Yes, so совесть. Conscience, literally with knowledge. Yeah, this is conscious. It's more, consciousness it's сознание, and conscious is совесть. But conscientiousness, it's also совесть. Dumb English. So they confused everything. But yeah, now I see it a little bit more clearly. So the origin, like when I remember when I was thinking about the word itself, like science, like science, knowledge, sphere. So common knowledge, like knowledge of that we have together. And I was thinking that exactly like this main idea of consciousness, which is like everything, and I'm just a part of it. So my experience, the experience of my life, which I have, which will end at some moment, it's a part of consciousness. And consciousness is basically it's all experiences united in one thing. You can't have experience, like I can't have experience of being you, for example. If you watch this video, I can't have experience of being you, and you can't have experience of being me. But consciousness itself, it's actually all our experiences. So all people or all animals and all other creatures which may have consciousness, it's just the one thing which has consciousness. And when you think about yourself, no, I am a separate person. Like, I'm living in a kind of personal, filter bubble. And this is me, and everything else, it's something else. So you try to separate yourself from the world. And that's like, all these ideas of free will and ego, whatever, the self. You may say, yeah, this is like me, and everything outside, it's not me. I am just this person. But if you think about it in terms of consciousness, like even like your the entire experience that you have from the moment you are born to the moment you die, it's just a part of a greater experience which consciousness has. And consciousness basically is the word for describing all experiences. Yeah, and you may think about yourself as consciousness, and that's the point. Are you able to get there? Are you able to transcend your identity and stop perceiving yourself as a part of the world or as an individual, and start perceiving yourself as the whole? So like there's spiritual ideas that you have to become selfless. And here, yeah, I don't like the interpretation and the language they use when they talk about selflessness, and that's the only point. Like this is the meaning of life, to become as senseless as possible, and to what's the word, exert your compassion to all living creatures and to the whole universe, and not to do anything for yourself. It's also nonsense, since there's just misunderstanding. So being selfless, it's completely a ridiculous idea. So the whole idea that instead of becoming selfless, senseless, instead of becoming senseless, you become, you realize that what you call the self, it's not you, it's not It's not the thing that is separate from the outer world. It's like the self. It's basically it's consciousness, and when you become aware of that, you basically become aware that first of all, you never been born, you will never die. This whole thing which you call you is actually something that something that you can't even explain, but it's like it's the whole world, and you as an individual, it's like nothing. And that's the myth. Like you kind of don't dismiss yourself. You understand that you are everything, and at the same time, you understand that what you call you, like your experience, your body, your mind, your friends, your family, your nation, whatever, the entire earth, it's just a part of it. It's just a little part. And you identify yourself with this person, with your, with your friends, with your family, with your nation, only because you aren't aware of the nature of yourself. Since when you understand that the self is not the person, that it's everything, you stop identifying it with yourself, and basically it helps you to get rid of all sorts of negativity which you may have, since you basically don't care. You understand this, like this is only the individual, and a whole lot of people, it's like the same thing. It's the same consciousness which experience itself through many individuals. And yeah, why should you be bothered with you know your stupid desires to have something, or your stupid desires to achieve something? If you haven't achieved anything, that's good. Who cares? Like, you achieved it in a different individual, and even if you don't experience it right now, who cares? Like, your consciousness basically like experiences it right now through a different individual, and it's not like you are just a puppet of the consciousness. And when you no longer identify yourself with the puppet, and you start identifying yourself with the consciousness, you basically, you may see what's really going on. You may see everything. And by seeing, of course, I mean, like, not seeing, but understanding what's happening, what is consciousness, what is the world, what's going on around. But, yeah, I'm glad to talk about and being not restricted by only one language, since I've been writing a lot about all these, ideas, and reading, of course. If you like to understand it better, of course, it requires, I guess, to read. I would say, in my experience, the German philosophers from Kant to Nietzsche, like Kant, Hegel, Fichte, Feuerbach, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche. If you read like them for a couple of years, maybe 30, 40, 50 books, yeah, it clarifies your understanding, and you'll see that what's going on, what is consciousness. But anyway, you will see, you don't see. Whatever I'm saying is just, most of it's just nonsense. Yeah, I'm just trying to study it. I'm trying to understand it better. This is what comes to my mind. This is how I interpret it. I interpret it according to my experience. I had this experience studying philosophy, studying psychology, studying myself, and now I'm trying to study the concept of consciousness. All right, so now Wikipedia, the last definition, which I'm going to read, and then I'm going to go and study the concept here on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So this is a long article, and I hope I'll be able to read it at the end, or like to read through it during this week. All right, consciousness at its simplest, is sentience. Like, what's the correct pronunciation of this? Sentience or sentience? There's not even such a word here. Come on, give me a word. How is it pronounced? Sentience. Okay, let's stay here.
Sentience.
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 Oh, and it's different. There's different pronunciation. So in UK it's sentience,
Sentience.
and in US it's sentience.
Sentience.
Sentience. Okay, I use the sentience since I'm trying to sound like an American. All right, sentience. Consciousness. At its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. Despite millennia of analysis, definitions, explanations, and debates by philosophers and scientists, consciousness remains puzzling and controversial, being at once the most familiar and most mysterious aspect of our lives. All right, let's just try to analyze the definition. So at its simplest, okay, it's like in short, sentience, sentience or awareness. Okay, awareness. What is awareness? Just being aware of something, and or not being asleep, basically being awake, of internal and external existence. Okay, internal and external existence. So sentience or awareness, like of both internal and external existence. So internal, I guess, it's about, there's some process in my body, and there's some blood and whatever, bones and some brain work and digestion and all this stuff. Yeah, I I may be unaware of it, like an animal. For example, an animal, it perceives the outer world and it knows its own life, but it, for example, doesn't know what's going on inside. No, I guess internal, it's more about your thoughts. So about the process of, there's some thoughts, and you are aware that you always have thoughts, and certain thoughts doesn't match the experience that you have. So there's kind of your thoughts, your ideas, your beliefs interconnected in your mind and your consciousness. And there's the real world, which may be totally different from your beliefs and ideas. And that's a common thing, like the world now. So we may leave it, and most people may have, like not most people, but all people may have different representation of the world. And that's true. Like for everybody, the world is a different thing. We can't say that we live in the same world. Everybody has their own unique perspectives, completely determined by their environment, by their upbringing, by their, occupation, their status, whatever they do in life, and they see the world through the cultural, personal, whatever, like all sorts of um, what lenses. And that's so funny. And of course, we have kind of common world, and this is the problem, I guess, like with the common world, that it's not there. Like when we say this is an objective world, yeah, when we say we both see like one thing, and when we say it's a real thing, and it's true, and we don't need to argue about it. But what is the meaning of this thing? Like, why is it here? What's the purpose? And what are we going to do about it? Here we may have lots of arguments, and these arguments are basically emerge out of our perception of the world. And then like our world, like each world is different from other worlds. That's astonishing. I mean, you can talk about it to lay people, since I don't know. In my experience, I would say that whenever I have a conversation about this ideas about consciousness and philosophy in the world, most of the people tend to believe that there's only one real world, and it's kind of objective world, and it's independent of our perception. And we all have a different perspectives of this world. Whereas obviously for a philosopher, it's kind of nonsense. So perception determines your world, and we don't live in the same world. It's the same as to say there's only one language, English, for example, and we just use different dialects, and everybody speaks different version of English. Whereas in reality, there's as many languages as many people, and each person uses the language in his or her unique way. Though we may copy each other, we may use similar grammar, we may use similar words to describe what we see. But the whole this process, like if we, for example, take one's thinking and write down, let's say, a file on a computer, which is going to be as long as one's life. I mean, I I I'm born, and then like my first whatever I said, like not even said, like my first thought. Let's suppose we have this. No, quite soon we are going to have it like here in real world. So there is some tool which you may put to your brain, and this tool is going to record everything what's going on in your brain. And yeah, now it sounds like science fiction, but I guess 20 30 years from now, and we'll have like Neuralink or some other companies will certainly develop such devices. And like, you may watch Black Mirror to see uh, like to have better picture of what am I talking about. So what I'm trying to imagine. So there's a device, you put it in your head, and you basically record everything what was going on. So it doesn't affect you in any way. So it's basically like a tool which records your thoughts. And then at the end of your life, you have a file, right? Or you have let's say, a long book, and this book is called like Vladimir Svitashev. And this, like you may read all, uh, let's say it consists of like 1,000,000 pages, and on these 1,000,000 pages, the whole stream of consciousness, the whole stream of ideas, and like the whole development of language from the beginning to the end. And then we may say, if we take each person, we'll see that there's no way to make it like, there will be some sentences. There certainly will be lots of words which I use with other, like uh, which I use and other people use too. There will be some sentences. Like if you take my stream of consciousness, there will be not some, there will be lots of sentences which I say and other people say as well. Maybe there will be even some paragraphs which I say and other people say. But chapters and like then it's going to be very different from each, like for each person. And so the whole idea of inner existence, internal existence, right? And language. So language, like we may say that everything that was written and said in this particular language, it's language itself. But we also may say that there's no such thing as language. There's many different versions of languages used by different people. Since like this article in Wikipedia, it was written by people, and we may say that like it's not English language, it's language of a certain people who perceived the world in a certain way, and they wrote down such, like using their own unique way of perceiving the world, this article. And this is their language. Even though there may be like hundreds and thousands of people who wrote this article, it's still the language of these people. And if I can read it, I may borrow some ideas and I may use them in my life. So I kind of, it's like consciousness. Yeah, I'll apply it for my life, but it doesn't mean that I will use, like, I'll create a new version of English and I may write another article about consciousness and somebody else may read it and apply it and use it in their lives. And it's going to be different from everybody. Well, again, it's like two ways of perceiving the language, the world, everything. So you may perceive it as there's like one thing and we borrow from this thing, and each unique way of using this thing, the world, the language, whatever, it's it belongs to the thing in itself, but also we may say no, it's the opposite, and each way, like consciousness, yeah, it's like exactly about how you may consider yourself as consciousness, and an individual is just a puppet of which plays an insignificant role in your existence. And you may also say that it's like consciousness is mine and I have this conscious experience, and my life is basically like I'm conscious, and I'm conscious only during this period of my life. So since the moment I'm born to the moment when I die, I am conscious, and everything else doesn't make any sense. It's not consciousness. It's like individual and social perception of the phenomena may be quite different. But again, it's like awareness of internal and external existence. Yeah, internal existence basically is like your thoughts, your ideas, your model of the world, which only you have, or which you may share with others, but it doesn't mean that others would accept it. And external existence is basically that it's independent of your perception, which is we may argue about quite seriously. It's like, is there anything independent of my perception? Of course, we may have external existence, of this flower, let's say, but now you don't see the flower, and for you it doesn't exist. Even though I may say, look, it's here, but you don't see it, and this flower exists only for me. But if you come to the room and see the flower, we may say this is external existence. Now we may agree upon that the flower exists outside of our, our perception, but for now it exists only for me. I can see it, you can't. Anyway, let's go on. Despite millennia of analysis, definitions, explanations, and debates by philosophers and scientists, consciousness remains puzzled and controversial. Yeah, of course, because everybody, like me included now, like saying, like even though I'm studying the concept, I'd like to say something that I already know, something that I learned, and add to this my personal perception. And of course, if you may study, you may do the same process. I mean, you may go read these definitions, try to think about them aloud. Yeah, good luck with that. Or at least write them down and share them with other people. And you may then say like something totally different from what I said. You may say this is consciousness, and whatever you said is just nonsense. Yeah, and this is why. And then you may write a book, and then I may write a book like arguing with you and looking for better arguments. Yes, every time it's different. Every time, that's fine. I mean, I like it. I like that there's no uh, certain definition, right, or explanation or whatever. Well, there's no definition. But anyway, okay, let's go on. Being at once the most familiar and the most mysterious aspect of our life. Yeah, who said that? Susan Schneider, 2008. Introduction, Max Wellmans. All right, back here. Okay, I'm not going to go on. I mean, I'm not interested in Wikipedia's article, and I don't want to spoil my perception of consciousness just reading all these sentences here. I'm going to check this article, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I have more trust to this source, and I certainly like to read this encyclopedia more than Wikipedia. I've studied here such concepts like courage. I remember the last time I dedicated a lot of time studying courage, and I was reading something about hope here. Yeah, but then most of my topics, which I chose for the speaking club, they wasn't described here, and I'm actually I'm glad to see this concept described here, and I want to get through it. But yeah, I guess it's going to take a lot of time. I'm thinking now whether or not it makes sense to start reading this today, or I may start tomorrow and today do something else. Okay, I'll use a few definitions from these sites and put them in my list. But now, yeah, let's check some quotes. Some quotes. So there are lots of quotes. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I finished today's studying by looking for a few quotes and probably analyzing a few quotes. And tomorrow I'll start studying from reading this article. Gandhi, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. 4,221 likes. Yeah, my mind. See, one of the most enlightened person. My mind. Yeah, and we will not go through your mind, Gandhi. We'll get on. Go on. Yeah, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. Again, their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. All right, Jung. I also like, yeah, I may talk about this. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, like now, I don't see anything special. Like when I read quotes, I usually, no, I'd like to find something special. If there's just a funny way of saying, like, people must pay more attention to what's going on in their own souls and minds. Yeah, okay, Yun. Thank you for enlightening us. This guy, I don't know who, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, don't know, don't know, don't know. Oh, Eckhart Tolle. Let's read this guy. I mentioned him in the beginning of this study and stream, and yeah, even though I kind of despise Eckhart Tolle, I still like to to read sometimes his quotes and mock them, or sometimes take them seriously. Depends on what's gonna be written here. So if your mind carries a heavy burden of past, you will experience more of the same bullshit. My mind carries so-called heavy burden of past. I remember almost everything what I was doing, and I know history, I guess, better than it depends, of course, my history, my way of making history. But I read like hundreds of historical books, and I really enjoyed reading them, and I learned from them so much. And I learned from Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now almost nothing. So you will experience more of the same. No, it's not the same. It's always novel and it's always different. Like the whole history and the whole past. You can you may study it endlessly, and you will always find like more and more meaningful stuff. Okay, the past perpetuates itself through lack of presence. Yeah, sounds good, but makes very little sense. The quality of your consciousness at this moment is what shapes the future. The quality of your consciousness. What does it mean? The quality of your consciousness. Like, can consciousness have the quality? I mean, if it's awareness, you are just aware or you are not aware. There's no way being more aware or less aware. And the quality probably means like, different states of awareness. Whereas in reality, there may be awareness and there may be unconsciousness or whatever at this moment. okay, we may say, right, so I may say that now I may pay attention to what I'm reading, or I may just daydream. And what he wants to say by the word, the quality of your consciousness, it's maybe substituted with the word, the quality of your attention. And in this case, of course, I'll agree and say, yes, true. There is maybe a different quality of attention. So you may focus your full attention on something, or you may focus just part of it, or you may be completely unfocused. You may listen to this video and think about your girlfriend or whatever, or about the book you read yesterday, or about something else. And in this case, yeah, and I may even read and talk about this concept of consciousness and being somewhere else. But it's about attention, it's not consciousness. So he doesn't, like, he uses the words, basically abuse language, and I don't like it. All right, the moment is what shapes the future. Yeah, but why the hell are you talking about future if you don't believe in future? I mean, if you are going to be consistent, right? So you have to say that there is only the present, and future is completely illusional. And you don't need to think about the past or the future. But now you try to say that the quality of your consciousness at this moment is what shapes the future. So you say future is shaped, but is it really shaped? I mean, if you don't believe in it, well, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, of course, probably there is some, bigger context, and just one quote kind of cut out of context doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, I may interpret it and probably he talks about something different. But I've read this book, The Power of Now, Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the guide to spiritual darkness. I mean, if you want to be enlightened, you don't need to read Eckhart Tolle's book. You need to sit and think and figure out everything on your own. But this book may spoil your perception of reality. And if you are a gullible person, like there are so many gullible persons on the internet who read Eckhart Tolle and praise him and say like he is a great guru. If you're a person like that and you believe everything he said and you follow his advice without being able to study deeply the concepts, which he, by the way, criticizes all the time. So if you are unable to study real science, physics, chemistry, biology, philosophy, like from a philosophical point of view, Eckhart Tolle is basically just, he is a smart guy. He's probably witty, but whenever I watched him, he wasn't witty. He was ridiculous and silly and stupid, and his way of talking, it's no, and again, I feel disgust, and this is the like what I experience. It's my honest opinion, and I may prove just by well, okay, I'll if you watch it and if you got to this point without being uh, without becoming mad yet. So if you are really interested in my opinions on Eckhart Tolle, if you want me to criticize him seriously, I mean, not just tell whatever, it's like now it's just, I'm not trying to criticize him, I'm just trying to make fun of him, and I am aware of what I'm doing. But if you want me criticize his book and his views, you may just write a comment and suggest a video where Eckhart Tolle tells some smart stuff or some enlightening stuff, or any sorts of wisdom. You may give me a link to this video and I'll record another video and watch the video by Eckhart Tolle and tell you why I think that, if maybe it may be smart. I don't know. The last time I watched him, it was like a few years ago, 3 years ago. And for me, he was just a charlatan, just a, spiritual, somebody who basically, I call these gurus who tell you that they figured out the nature of the reality, the nature of the world, and they just gain popularity, they gain approval by teaching other people some nonsense, but basically by playing, by using language in a kind of way where, you don't teach anything. You just demonstrate your excellence, your superiority in language and certain concepts. And it's something that I don't like. I mean, I can't watch it. For me, I definitely think in a different way when I, okay, stop it here. Once again, wanna me talking about Eckhart Tolle, write a comment, share a link where he says something meaningful, or you may give me a few paragraphs written by him from the book, and I may talk about it for a couple of hours and show you how whatever he is going to say may be deconstructed from the point of view of, let's say, German philosophers. Like, I may take right now, who, okay, if your mind carries heavy burden of past, you will not be as the same, the past. Well, I might take Schopenhauer, for example, and find 3, 4, 5 paragraphs which will demonstrate the stupidity of these 3 sentences, And Eckhart Tolle, yeah, if you are familiar with German philosophy, so if you read Hegel and Schopenhauer, so you may know what was going on between Hegel and Schopenhauer. And I am, I guess I'm on the Schopenhauerian side more. So after I read 10 volumes of Hegel, and I believe that I knew everything, and I was for half a year walking and thinking I'm like the greatest philosopher since I could understand Hegel, and I know like this being, non-being, whatever. And then I read Schopenhauer, and damn, I was a fucking idiot. Like everything what Hegel said was just a stupid nonsense. And I was so gullible and naive to believe every word and believe that I may become a great philosopher after reading this absolutist philosopher. And well, from that time, I became more careful after, when I just read something or, try to analyze the meaning of somebody else's utterances. And Eckhart Tolle is like Hegelian side. So basically, lots of nonsense, a careful speaker, like fluent and thorough and skillful, but behind his speech there's no real substance, just speech for its own sake, just making black out of white and white out of black, just a sophist. Yeah, and I don't admit him not because of that. Of course, if he was a great sophist I would admit him, but when I listen to him I say, what? Like, I can't listen for 5 minutes. You're such a stupid fellow. Well, okay. So if you want to argue, you know what to do. So now who's there? And again, Eckhart Tolle. Okay, sorry, guy. I'm not gonna read more of you. Yoon. Okay, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light. Okay, it already was there. Why the hell they repeat the same sentence? Where's real philosophers who studied consciousness? Why are there some jerks? Freud. Okay, this is a nice guy. Let's read what he said. Properly speaking, the unconscious is the real psychic. Properly speaking, the unconscious is the real psychic. Its inner nature is just as unknown to us as the reality of the external world. And it is just as imperfectly reported to us through the data of consciousness as is the external world through the indications of our sensory organs. The unconscious is the real psychic. Psyche means psyche, like a, soul, whatever. Its inner nature of unconscious is just as unknown to us as the reality of the external world. Oh, okay. I guess there was debates about, what's the nature of the external world, like thing itself, Kantian ideas, and in the 18th, 19th century, agnosticism, for example, we don't know what's the world. So we already know the world through our perceptions. But if you get rid of our perceptions, we don't know whether or not the world is still there. So we may perceive it, but is it possible to perceive the world without a perceiver? Like, is it still there? Nobody is able to say, since the entire book, The Critique of Pure Reason, written by Kant, is dedicated to this subject, investigating the limits of our minds and our consciousness. And people mostly like to talk about something that they don't understand and try to make up some imaginary ideas. And most of these ideas, like for example, the now or the present used by Eckhart Tolle, well, probably he distinguishes from present and now, but anyway, for me, it's the same thing. So it's just an idea, and just an idea which he tries to present and say that this is real, this is what's going on, and he's he doesn't understand the nature of his own mind. So he thinks that he figured that out, but in reality he just makes something up and tried to make other people believe that this is true. Yeah, and once again, in Kantian critique of pure reason, so this idea that the world, we can say whether or not it's real. We can say anything only about our perceptions. Even if we perceive like material certain things, it doesn't mean that these things are real. It means that we can perceive them, and the world is a thing in itself. But Freud wants to say that the psyche, like our spirit or our soul, it's also the world, the world in itself. So it's also unknown. We also have no idea what it is. And I guess like Freud was one of the fathers of psychology, like modern psychology. And before Freud, I guess in 19th century, yeah, it was, more intellectuals were concerned with the world, and they tried to study the world and philosophy. Like there was natural philosophies, and Hegel, for example, wrote books about natural philosophy and Encyclopedia of Sciences. But for Freud, it was like this unconscious, this soul. And he said, like, let's study the soul, let's study the psychology. We know a lot about external world, but we know very little about like inner world. And this is the like the field of study. Let's do that. And people didn't study it a lot before, since it was kind of, everybody thought that it's not real science. So real science, you have to take something material, something that many people can touch, smell, feel, and study. But inner world, your thoughts, your ideas, it's just subjective. And who the hell wants to study anything subjective? And is there any way to study something subjective? Since subjective means that there's only like the subject who can experience it, and ever like it can be objective. But Freud, for him and for psychology today, it's also, they try to find some objectives in the soul, in the mind, in the psyche. And it is just as imperfectly reported to us through the data of consciousness. So again, we think imperfectly reported to us. To whom? To bodies? I mean, what reports the data of consciousness? And to whom? Like ego, it, and superego. Come on. But okay, imperfectly report to us through the data of consciousness as is the external world through the indications of our sensory organs. Okay, I can actually take this quote and talk about psychology a little bit. Yeah, I think I can build a conversation about psychology if I take this whole quote and start talking, why people started studying consciousness, and why they were studying the world, and what's the difference between outer world and external world, internal world, external world. Well, I think that if I wouldn't find anything better, I'll probably take this one. Let's go with Schrödinger, like scientists, famous scientists. Consciousness cannot be accounted for its physical terms. For consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. Once again, consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms. For consciousness is absolutely fundamental. it cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. I have troubles with understanding. Yeah, once again, consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms. So basically, you can't say anything about consciousness in physical terms, which means that consciousness isn't physical. Is that what he wants to say? Or for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. Then he wants to say that consciousness is absolutely fundamental. This is the, let's say, most important thing. And then it cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. And there's no way to talk about it. Like it's impossible to describe it in physical terms, but it's even more impossible to describe it in like there's nothing else rather than physical terms. In other words, if you want to understand the nature of consciousness, study physics, since physics gives you a certain perspective on consciousness, which is not perfect, but which is better than any other perspectives. So if you want to study consciousness, it's better to study physics than to listen to some spiritual gurus like Eckhart Tolle, who tells you, like, everything what they may make up and twist the ideas and whatever. Okay, I'll take this one for a conversation, and we'll try to figure out together what does it mean. Huxley, consciousness is only possible through change. Change is only possible through movement. What he wants to say here. I don't want to like think deeply about this sentence. Let's go on. Jung again. To find out what is truly individual in ourselves, profound reflection is needed. And suddenly we realize how uncommonly difficult this discovery of no more Jung. It's like 3 quotes and all of them fucking moralistic, profound reflection is needed. Reflect profoundly. Like, yeah, Jung spent lots of time reflecting profoundly on in the nature of consciousness. Happy for you. Voltaire. This is, yeah, it's like somehow, I was reading lots of books. Yeah, now I see for Jung, yeah, I have kind of ambivalent feelings towards Jung. And I remember there was few books like Psychological Types and probably some other books which I read, and I had kind of admiration and respect for Jung. But there were other books I was reading, and I was like, in this, for example, in this notebook, yeah, there's one moment in my personal history when I shift from English to Russian, and I was reading a Union book in English, and I was writing about it in Russian. And there's like, I guess, 10, maybe not 10, maybe 5, from 5 to 10 notes about Jung. And I can't bear them. I just writing like Jung, that's all. And it was the last time when I was reading Jung. I mean, after that, I haven't read anything from Jung, even though before I read like 5 volumes of his books. Yeah, and I guess this final encounter determined my perception. So whenever I hear about Jung, I might talk about him. I may, have a discussion, but there's kind of dislike and some kind of disgust. So whenever I read, not whenever, it's like sometimes he says something smart, but I don't like his moralism. I don't like his, crazy views about, mythology and like not everything about archetypes, but there's certainly something like childish and naive and which may be funny, but when you want to create a clear understanding of the world, of yourself, and especially Jung was one of the, as we know, greatest psychologist of the 20th century. And when you read his books about alchemy, or it doesn't help you to build a clear understanding. And when you read like people who, like some physicists and philosophers, like Schopenhauer, for example, or uh, Kant, it certainly helps you to understand what's going on and how the world is built and who you are and what are you doing. Voltaire, yeah, I guess if Voltaire pretended to be a psychologist, I would have the same attitude towards him. But he is kind of a funny guy, just philosopher, writer, poet. And yeah, I have a very, like, probably because he was, he made me he didn't only made he made me laugh when I was reading him a lot. I remember like his philosophical tractatus and some other books which I read 2013. I was able to laugh aloud, just being alone in my room and reading a book and having like real laugh. I mean, real laugh. And I was like, like you watch a comedy show with a group of people, you may laugh. When you are watching it alone, there's less probability that you are going to laugh. But when you read a book, the probability that you will have a real laugh, you may have some sense of amusement, but it's not laugh. And when I was reading Voltaire, I remember those moments when I just put a book down and was laughing for 10, 15 seconds. Just, wow, that's so funny. Yeah, and he was very smart. Not just smart, he was a wise guy. And I remember reading Schopenhauer, he pointed out that Voltaire, he was a believer in free will for the most part of his life. And well, when you think about such people like Voltaire, you have to understand that he was like a genius. So he wasn't just an average individual. He was a genius. He probably was one of the smartest person alive at his time. It was the end of what 17th 18th century. It was the end of the 18th century, and he was the smartest guy of his time. And for the most part of his life, I guess he changed his ideas at the age of 40 or 50. He believed in free will, and eventually he abandoned this idea. And here's the whole book. It's called Metaphysical Tractatus, and in this book he basically like one portion of it is dedicated to the concept of free will. And he basically says like why he believed in it for all his life and how he changed his mind at the end of his life, like when he grew older, and what made him to change his mind and how he came to the realization that there is no free will. So, and it's, when I was reading it, I was thinking, that's amazing. Like, that's so great. Since most of the time, you see only people, and it's almost impossible to have any meaningful conversations with such people. So they say that, for example, I like to talk about free will with compatibilists. It's possible to have like some arguments and to learn something from conversations. But when there's people who are only on one side, like even though I'm a determinist, I still may consider like my knowledge is insufficient. I may say, yeah, there's either determinism or I have no idea what is there. But to say that there is free will and there's no determinism, it's basically for me a kind of naive way of thinking about reality. And so when you have with conversations with people who believe in free will, like what irritates me in these conversations and debates that most of them haven't actually studied anything about determinism, and they all believe in free will not because they really compared both sides and decided that they like prefer to think about free will and preferred like this guy James William James, the father of American psychology. He basically was studying, at least he was studying the concept a little bit, and he eventually said, okay, there's like no way for me to say that there is free will, there is no free will, but I would choose believe in free will, and this is the first act of my free will. And well, at least he was familiar with arguments of determinists, and he knew something about the matter, and he wasn't so naive. But most of the time, people who talk about free will, they're so gullible, and it's like, yeah, you have no idea what are you talking about, but you still try to defend this position, and you never actually seen, like, I wouldn't say now I well, I have to have, like, me, I believed in free will. Like, I didn't pay attention to this, ideas till 2020 when I read Schopenhauer seriously. But when I look back at my history, at my life, I would say that I believed in free will for most part of my life. When I first encountered Schopenhauer, I stopped believing in free will and started thinking, like, studying science deeper and learning psychology, philosophy, like studying determinism, and there was transformation. But I would say there probably were some discussions which I had with people about free will who got the opposite transformation. So they were when they first started studying determinism. Yeah, there was at least one of the discussion I can remember. So there was a guy, uh, like an old guy. I was riding on train. Riding, is it the right way of saying that? So okay, I was coming back from the south. It was 2013. It was 2013, and I went to the south. I spent there a couple of weeks, and then, like, to swim in the sea, it doesn't matter. So, and then when I was going back on the train, I met a man. He was like 64, and we had a discussion, like a long discussion. He was a school director, and before he became a director, he was a teacher of literature. And yeah, we discussed Saltkov-Shchedrin a lot, and like poetry, Pushkin, whatever. Discuss philosophy, and he basically tried to convince me to take his religious views, since he said, like, for the most part of his life, like for more than 50 years, he was 65. For more than 50 years, he was a materialist and not just material, but militant atheist and materialist. And it was probably like the Soviet Union period. I mean, who knows? Like, the guy was, yeah, it was in 2013. The guy was 60, so he was born like at 1950, and obviously he was educated and brainwashed through materialistic propaganda. But anyway, so the point was that he was this he wasn't a determinist. Maybe he was, but we didn't discuss determinism in depth. But he was like materialist and militant atheist. And we had a discussion, and he said he changed his worldview and became kind of spiritual guy after the age of 50, not even 50, at the end of his 50s. And there was a reason for that. So he was focused on studying, and he was focused on his work, and he was very passionate literature teacher for all these years. And then he became a director, and he worked in school, and he was focused on his work, and it was the most important thing for him. And then at the end of his 50s, he got, I don't know, maybe he was married before, but I don't remember exactly. But he said he was basically he didn't have children, and at the end of 50s he had the first daughter, and then like few years later he had the second daughter, and he showed me a few pictures of his daughters, and he was so proud of them, and saying, like, after this happened, I started believing in God, in spirituality. I stopped believing like in free will. Yeah, probably would touch the topic of free will. I don't remember exactly, but the whole idea was like he was complete materialist, and then he became believing in some spiritual forces, and in some concepts. And I remember this moment, since I basically was talking. We discussed religion, and I was interested in Buddhism. That time I was studying Buddhism, not just theoretically, but I went to martial arts school and started there as well. But I remember, like, I was reading lots of literature, like Eastern literature about Buddhism, and practiced meditation, and it was kind of, I like to do that. And when we talked about Buddhism and religion, he said Buddhism is not a religion. Like, only Christianity is a religion, and Buddhism is something else. And we argued, like, Christianity, Buddhism, and I tried to, kind of, I didn't try to convince him in anything. I was just, sharing my views, what I was thinking back then, and books which I read. And he tried to convince me to believe in, in God, in Christ, to to take this religion point of view. And yeah, and then, like, he was, we had an amazing conversation, but in the end he was disappointed a little bit, and he, like, that he couldn't convince me. He believed that, after our conversation, I'll, go and become a Christian or whatever, and, go to church or whatever. And he said, you'll come to this later, like, your mind, your whatever, like, I see that you are gonna become a Christian in the future, sooner or later. And I said, okay, maybe, I don't know, like, who knows. But now I'm mostly interested in science, not in, in religion. Though religion, I wouldn't dismiss it completely. There's many valuable things in religion, and I like to read some religious texts. But yeah, coming back to Voltaire, so one of the most admirable guys from history. Though I didn't read lots of his books, I read few plays. Zaira, I read Candide and the Optimism. I read Zadig. I read Philosophical Tractate. I read Metaphysical Tractate. I read some letters from, I don't remember from where, like from America. And this funny episode was, which made me laugh, sitting in my room and reading the book. It was about the guy, I guess his name was William Penn or Will Penn. He actually was the founder of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is called Pennsylvania after this guy. And there was another guy, Fox, some John Fox. Don't remember the first name. The second was probably Fox. And like how they went to, yeah, and Quakers. Yeah, there was a colony. They created a colony in America. It was Quakers. And he basically described how they took some missionary, like Christian missionary, and like some interactions and talks, and how funny it was. And this guy, they wanted to kill him, like missionaries, and they wanted to make him to do something, but he he basically was like staying on his point, saying, no, I'm like, this is my religion, I'm going to believe in that. And he kind of founded a new religion. And yeah, anyway, Voltaire. So meditation is the dissolution of thoughts in eternal awareness of pure consciousness without objectification. Oh, how many, like, is it Voltaire? I already, like, Voltaire was very simple guy. I mean, in his language, I read Russian translation, by the way. I haven't read them in French, but Russian translation, this language, one of the most beautiful and in the same time, like, profound language which I ever encountered. And now it's like eternal awareness or pure consciousness without objectification, known without thinking, merging finitude in infinity. Okay, it's like very spiritual quote, and I guess it came from his earlier. No, he became more scientific at the second part of his life. And I don't want to translate all of this, like eternal awareness, pure consciousness from, with capital letters. It's not what I'm gonna pay attention to. Man, oh, Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. I tell you solemnly that I have many times tried to become an insect, but I was not equal even to that. I swear, gentlemen, that to be too conscious is an illness, a real thorough going illness. Yeah, what's wrong with these quotes? Yeah, I know, like I've read notes from underground, and you may say that Dostoevsky tells, like, you may read the quote and say, oh, this is what Dostoevsky said, and you may interpret it literally and say, this is what he thinks about consciousness, or about, to be conscious is an illness. And this is like, you may even reduce this quote to that and say, to be conscious is an illness, and say that this is Dostoevsky. But Dostoevsky mocks kind of rational, over rational, and almost inactive man of his time. It's like basically he mocks intellectuals of his time, that they're, think too much and do very little. And it's like, it's not Dostoevsky, it's just something said by his character. So in the same way, like this may be not Voltaire, it may be something that a stupid character of Voltaire says in a play, and then you may read it and take it as as real and say, this is like what this guy thought. But anyway, so I don't like to take any quote from a fictional character and consider it seriously. And I don't want to waste time. Jung again, don't want to read Jung. Tesla, too long. Kierkegaard, well, like I have kind of ambiguous feelings towards this guy as well. So I've read his, what was the book? Something about fear, when he considered Abraham as the modern hero, and compared him with Caesars and other historical figures like Alexander, Caesar, and philosophers also, compared with Aristotle and Plato, and said like Abraham is the superior man to all of this. And after that I lost my interest in the book, but I guess I read it to the end. Some parts of it was quite exciting, but others, no, I don't remember exactly, it was 2015. And I read only one book. I heard lots of about Kierkegaard, that he was the father of existentialism, or one of the fathers, and he had a huge influence on existentialism. He was like, people compare him to Nietzsche and say like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, they stay like almost on the same page. But for me, Kierkegaard is just, no, Nietzsche is basically a man of science, and Kierkegaard is just a man of faith. Yeah, and their styles, of course. Like what I pay attention to mostly when I read something, it's not just the content, it's more about the style, about language. So, and I'm very keen in discerning the strong and the weak language. And for me, when I read Nietzsche, so I see like it's one of the strongest language which I ever encountered. And when I read Kierkegaard, it's just some middle ground. When I read Kant, it's something between middle and strong. Schopenhauer also one of the strongest languages. So for me, it's like the ideas, the beliefs, all this is like it's not so important as the quality and the strength and the power of language. And usually when I read one book and I don't see a powerful, and by power, of course, I mean like it's not just whether it's precise and clear and metaphorical, beautiful, whatever. No, it's how it affects my thoughts. So powerful language, you read it and you can't stop reading, and wow, that's so exciting. Just a man expresses something so clearly, and like I read it and I see that I couldn't say better, and nobody whom I read before could say better the same thing. This is power. And when you read like Kierkegaard, there's some elements, but nothing to compare with like Schopenhauer, let's say. But anyway, with every increase in the degree of consciousness, and again, like degrees of consciousness, okay, like a plant, an animal, a human, different degrees of consciousness. If it's just pure awareness, it's all right, degree of consciousness. And in proportion to that increase, the intensity of despair increases. Okay, he is a pessimist in this sentence. The more consciousness, the more intense the despair. So the whole idea is that the world is suffering, and yeah, it's like quite existentialistic. So the world is suffering. The more you are aware of what's going on, the more you are going to suffer. Since if you live in a fool's paradise, you may think that, all is good, you know, we are in a, we live in the best possible world, as Leibniz thought. Yeah. And that's cool. But it basically means that you are unconscious. So as soon as you are becoming aware of the external world, what's going on there, like, people, animals, suffering, injustice, criminals, their misunderstanding, misfortune, stupid accidents, you know, death, mortality in general, stupidity, foolishness, whatever. You become more and more uh, pessimistic, and probably finally you get in despair, depression, and commit suicide, since makes no sense. But it's like, again, it's just one side of the coin, since it's both, and it depends on your, like you say, yeah, I'm aware that there are lots of misery and suffering, but I'm not sure that I understand it. I mean, I'm not sure that this is the only thing that is there, and this is the thing that condemns reality. I mean, that's okay. There's lots of suffering, but there's lots of pleasure, and there's lots of beautiful and amazing stuff. And we understand that, yeah, like, to have this amazing stuff, we have to have awful stuff, and to have pleasure and joy, we have to have suffering. So does that, like, for me, I take it as a naive and gullible way of looking at the world. So the more you're aware, the more pessimistic you are. No, you may be very pessimistic as Schopenhauer, being aware that there's no free will, and that whatever is going on is just nothing in essence, right? So you may be even a nihilist, but in the same way you say, so what? You still, there's lots of amazing stuff, and you may have a lot of love, and life may be very exciting, even if you suffer. Like, take Nietzsche, for example. No, these days Nietzsche is taken as also like this nihilistic philosopher by many. And if you read Nietzsche and study a little bit his biography, you understand that he was the one who suffered so much. Like, he was one of the most miserable creature in the universe, in his physical, like in the reality. So he was sick, I guess, from the age of 30 or even earlier. I don't remember exactly, but the point was, like, the second part of his life, before he got mad, he was sick, and he had uh, headaches, and he had poor vision. At the age of 36, he couldn't see like 2 steps before him, and he had terrible digestion. He destroyed, like, as he said, like in his essay Ecce Homo, for example, he says that his digestion was what, not destroyed, but, well, let's say, spoiled by inappropriate food, and he didn't know anything how to eat, and he was, like, basically, his health was terrible. And besides, he had a very difficult relationships with people, so his social life was terrible as well. People didn't understand him. People didn't, like, maybe they like him, but at some moments, but he was misunderstood by anybody. And in the same time, if you read his books, he is the most happiest person ever. So he basically prays the reality and says that it's like, this is so ironic. So his life, he is the most miserable creature. He has lots of diseases. He suffers. He experiences pain almost every day. And at the same time, he writes brilliant novels, and not novels, but philosophical works and poems. And then, like, he lives in this world. So for him, this, like, writing and thinking and philosophy is a form of escaping the real world of suffering. But he doesn't blame the world. He doesn't say, like world is terrible. He says it's all amazing. Like even suffering itself is amazing. And look how I can describe it. Look at my Zarathustra. Look at my, Beyond Good and Evil, or whatever, Twilights of Idols, gay science. Yeah. And, and Kierkegaard is basically, oh, I'm aware everybody is, suffering, and there's so much pain, and children die, and there's wars, and people suffer, and it shouldn't be there. There only should be bliss and infinite happiness. No, this may be also happiness. And often you see that people who are, who have good health, who have, lots of money and good social relationships, and who are born into these conditions where, you have basically everything. They are those who suffer the most. And those who really suffer, they don't take it. Like in Kierkegaard, probably, I don't know, I haven't studied his biography, but probably he was a guy from a good family, and he had all these opportunities for studying. Let's check it. Søren Kierkegaard. Like, let's just see. I want to just, I want to check whether I'm right or wrong. Like, his family. So was born to an affluent family of Copenhagen. Affluent means rich, right? His mother was served as a maid in the household before marrying his father, Michael. She was an unassuming figure, quiet and not formally educated. His granddaughter, wait, affluent probably means an opposite of wealthy. What affluent means? Having plenty of money, nice houses, expensive things. Yeah, see, my my guess is almost it's almost certain. So was born to an affluent family in Copenhagen. That's so exciting. I mean, seriously. I don't want to read who exactly was his father and what he said, but see, there's some pattern. Yeah, I don't say that it's exactly because he was born in a affluent family and he was rich and had all opportunities for education and stuff, that he became kind of nihilistic and pessimistic about the nature of reality and about nature of life. But it may be the cause that, yeah, he has everything, and then he got depressed and say, no, there's suffering and all this stuff. Whereas people who, don't have anything, and they just, it depends. Yeah, it depends. Not always. But it may be the case when you are not rich and when you suffer a lot and you try to cope with life, or you try to thrive, or so you try to get somewhere, right? And you have some path in front of you, and you may go this path, and you may enjoy. You may set some purposes. It makes the whole life, the whole experience of your life different from if you already got everything and you don't know what to do with your life. But now it's like, again, one of the biggest problems. So you are happy, you are healthy, and you think that the reality is cruel and stupid and miserable and absurd. And you may be poor, but you strive for survival, and everything makes sense, and it's so funny. That's that's the nature of reality. It's infinite, so you may interpret it in one way or another. But the problem with these people who call themselves philosophers or scientists or gurus, so they may tell you like, this is what it is. And since they're like, Søren Kierkegaard, for example, you may be a schoolboy, or you may be a student at your philosophy university, whatever, and you may, like, your professor might tell you like, this is Søren Kierkegaard. He survived for 200 years, and he was, the father of existentialism, whatever. And there's like an article on Wikipedia showing how great he was, and this is what he said. This is what he said, and therefore, if he was such a great guy, this must be true. And then, if you are a gullible, naive person, you might say, yeah, who am I? Just a stupid little boy or a student, and I don't know nothing, and I know nothing. But this guy, he probably was famous and well, educated and blah blah blah, and I have to believe what he said. And then you may, your perception of the world may be spoiled just by this stupid guy, or no, not stupid, but I mean, of course, there's both sides. So you may say it's all good, it's all bad, depends on how you perceive it. But the problem is, like, you have to understand what's going on in your life. Is it really good? Is it really bad? So if it's good, okay, you may describe it and say it's good, and you may give your reasons. If it's bad, describe it. You may describe it as well. So, but okay, I talked too much about Søren Kierkegaard and this despair, but I'd like to take this quote and see how people will react to it. So I'm going to read it and see whether or not they are going to agree with Søren Kierkegaard. And probably I even, I'll try. Yeah, certainly I'll try. See, when you watch these videos, my studying streams, if you pay attention, you may, take our meetings, if you also come into our meetings once a week. So you may, like, there's many levels of communication which is going on in our meetings. There's like some kind of superficial level. So people who basically don't know what's going on, they come there once a week, and when they get out, they don't check anything. They don't read my articles. They don't study the topics. They just come for 2 hours, and then they go and live their own lives. And basically, the conversation with these people, it's like, it's most of the time is kind of superficial. There are some people who pay attention, who at least check some articles which I write, publish on my, on the group, who watch some videos, who try to think about the topics. And there's another level of communication. And there's the third level, where it's like people who really are passionate about, what's going on, and they try to study on their own. So it's not just, uh, reading some materials which I publish and watching some videos which I publish, but they make their own questions. They try to figure out what we are doing, and they try to figure out what we are doing, like trying to make sense of our conversations. And there's another level of communication. And if you watch it right now, if you are a member of our club, and you may understand what I'm talking about here, it's like, see what's going to happen in next Saturday. I'm going to take this quote from Søren Kierkegaard, and well, I'm gonna pretend that this is the right way of looking at the world, and I'm gonna give some reasons. So I'm gonna read the quote, and I'm gonna say, yeah, this seems to be the case. Look, guys, like, if you are unaware of what's going on in reality, you may believe that all is good, but then you may just see how much pain is there, how much injustice and whatever. And probably the more aware you become, the more despair you have to experience. Yeah, and I'm going to develop like this argument and see how people will react. And if they all agree at the end, I say, no, it's not true. Let's it's just boost. I just made it up. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sometimes I have this, I take some ideas and try to make sense out of them, but then I try to deconstruct them and place them, in a different framework, and see how they may be considered from several points of view. But yeah, I took this quote. What else? Camus. This is kind of a follower of Kierkegaard. He considered the whole reality as an absurd, whatever was going on there was. And he may be understood, of course. He was, experienced. He lived like from the beginning of, I guess, he lived the first part. He lived through the first part of 20th century. So two wars, and all these terrible conditions and struggle between communism and bourgeois communism, the proletariat and bourgeoisie. Yeah, and yeah, for him, life. I've read the myth of Sisyphus and other. Like, I read the myth of Sisyphus and something about the rebellious, or the rebellious man, or I don't know the exact translation, but probably if you know Camus, you have to know there's a book where he basically uh, criticizes there's some letters to his friend, and his friend, I guess he was German, and basically he criticizes this man they can criticize Germans and nationalism and war and all stuff which were going on. And yeah, and Camus is also this kind of thinker, which nihilistic thinker. It's like all this controversy or opposition. I guess for me, at least, it's like my way of. It's my experience. So to understand it in depth, you don't need to read all of these guys like second-rate thinkers. Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. So two guys, and this is a complete controversy in terms of the strongest languages. So Schopenhauer basically on a pessimistic side. And you read his books and you may get acquainted with the harsh and serious pessimism, like the cruelest arguments and the most. But it doesn't mean that you have to become a pessimistic. It's just one way of looking at the reality. And Schopenhauer tried to describe the reality as if he was a manifestation of pessimism and suffering and pain. And it's also a Buddhist way of looking at the world, and probably Christians as well. But the opposite side, we may say, is like Nietzsche. So it's like Nietzsche, basically, even if he suffered a lot and had this terrible experience, for him, he tries to portray reality, at least in his late works, I guess starting from a human all to human, maybe in his first few works, which were like this Greek, they were about Greek music and the birth of strategy out of music, I guess. The first book. He wasn't optimistic there, but yeah, he said after 36 he started when like 36 was the crucial point in his life, and his father died when he was 36. And Nietzsche said when he was 36 he also started like evaluating his life. He came to the realization that he was his worldview was spoiled by pessimistic, nihilistic views of Schopenhauer and other philosophers, ecclesiastic ideologists and philosophers. That's how he called them. And after 36, he started basically developing this, idea of not optimistic necessarily, but kind of enjoying life, amor fati, let's say. And this worldview, 36, it was 1980, I guess. Yeah, for him it was 1980 since he was born in 1944, not 1980, 1844, it was 1880. And the last 10 years of his writing career, he basically was trying to develop this worldview, like, we may call it, what was not accepting life, but admiring life, praising life, let's say it that way. So again, to understand this dichotomy between pessimism and optimism, my personal way of looking at it, I understand that there's no way, it's like present and past. So there's no now. Basically, the ideal is to find the middle ground between optimism and pessimism and stay there. But there's like to find the middle ground, it's the same as to find the now between the present and between the past and the future. So you basically can't find it. And sometimes you are on the side of optimism, sometimes you are on the side of pessimism, and that's okay. But to be completely overwhelmed with one side, I guess this is, you have to always be aware what's going on. So as soon as you shift to one side more and more, there's probably something in your life that you have to pay attention to and change, especially if you get to one side, to the extreme. And and the best way of changing it is just studying the opposite side, not just reading some philosophers and watching them, since they'll make you hate what's going on. But studying is different. So you don't need to have your personal attachment to what you study. So I may study like these pessimists like Camus, Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer, like in depth, and I may enjoy the process of studying. I shouldn't agree with everything they say. I may just try to analyze why they think that way and what was going on, and again, and gain lots of knowledge by studying. And in the same way, I'm a study optimist. There are lots of gullible optimists, like, Leibniz, for example, or Auguste Comte, the father of sociology. There are many others, of course. I probably not familiar with all of them. But the point is that uh, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, two philosophers where this contradiction was kind of taken at two extremes. And one more thing about it, it's the thought which I started developing, I guess, 4 years ago when I wrote my Hour of Thinking. Our Thinking is here. Just let me show you. It's on my site, and it was my kind of the last work which I wrote in Russian, Our Thinking. It was published at 21st June 2017, like 4 years ago. And here, basically, there's some see how it ends. So it ends, I will think in English. Basically, I came to the point where, like in my Russian language, I basically there was no way to make it better. I mean, I can't tell you everything about it, but the whole idea, the main idea of this exercise, I called it an hour of thinking, was to think for 1 hour every day and go deeper and deeper in my consciousness and learn how to write better and explain. Like it was an exercise which was dedicated to improving my form. And eventually I improved my form to the level where I said, man, that's impossible. Like nobody nobody reached, like there was very few people in history who reached the same level in Russian language. And it's better to just choose another language, since there was a problem. And the problem was that I could think all the time. So I can spend, well, I was writing like one piece of paper, like piece of text, whatever. I was dedicating just an hour to writing, an hour a day, but I could think about what I was going to write for the entire day, and I could focus my attention. So it's like it's a product of like, to write it down. It took me just an hour, sometimes even less. But to make it up, it took me like the entire day. And I basically could just think the whole day and construct my thoughts and place them in a certain way and just see how I may, arrange them better. And then I write an article. And then next day I write another article. And it's so fucking mind-boggling, since I developed some sense of, it was so interesting to think that I could basically sit alone at home the entire day and think. And I got the same amount of pleasure and excitement as I get when I play video games. And even more, since I fight my passion to play video games using my passion to write and think. And eventually the passion of writing and thinking won. And English was the only way to kind of to distract me from thinking, since like I like to write, but there were so many things which which wasn't appropriate at that time to say. So I was too young, and I, talking about philosophy and death and, philosophers and science, I wasn't ready. But what I wanted to say when I brought up this article was that here I was developing this idea, like Schopenhauer called it the philosophy of old women. And I was basically developed it in a way that when you are young, so the idea, so how I understand this dichotomy between optimism and pessimism. So when you are young, there's the whole life in front of you. And you may find lots of meaning in it. So you may say there are lots of things to do in life, and you may be happy about it. You may, dedicate your life pursuing certain stuff and, growing your personality, developing your perception, developing your consciousness, developing your personal world, like doing something for the community, and it may make lots of sense. And and life may be enjoyable. I mean, when you're a kid, there's, even if you're oppressed all the time, which is not the common case, we see that most of the time it's like it's an average life. But even if you have lots of troubles, there's lots of things to enjoy. I mean, when you have all this energy when you're 10 years old and you just laugh at everything and run whenever, and you have unlimited energy, and it's so funny. And this is kind of like, if you start thinking in pessimistic terms at that time, you may basically spoil your whole worldview by that. So you may you may come up with an idea that world is terrible, life is terrible, the best thing which has to be done right now is to die. And you may, like, you may literally these rock musicians who just take drugs and go in all sorts of extreme directions. You may just adopt this lifestyle, and you may just ruin your life, like in your early age. And by the way, I've done it. I mean, I understand it only because I've done it. So from 10 to 20 is basically my life. I try to ruin it as much as possible. And I even remember when I started smoking when I was 8. And then when I was 11 or 12 or 10, I don't remember exactly, there was a moment which I remember clearly. So I was at a bus station. No, I was in a bus, in a trolley bus. And at the bus station, there was like a few minutes when a driver got to the depot. So he had to take some papers, and I had a few minutes to smoke, to get out of a trolley bus and smoke. And I was with my peers, and we went out and we started smoking. And I was smoking fast since I knew there's just one minute. And there was another guy, like who wasn't from our company, uh, just some random guy in the street, and he was also smoking, and or he wasn't smoking, I don't remember, but he made a kind of remark. He said to me, he said, if you, and I was a boy, like, and he was maybe 20 years old, maybe a little bit older. Later I asked him who he was, and he said he was a medical student, or some physician, whatever. He said, if you are going to smoke like this so fast, you will die at the age of 50. And I said, at the age of 50, man, you are crazy. It's like, I'm not going to live till the age of 50. I'm going to die at the age of 25 or 30. Like after 30, it's like all like there's nothing to do after 30. See, and it was like my worldview when I was 11. So I was thinking, 30 years old, it's too old. I mean, after 30, there's nothing to do. And I was looking at these guys, especially on old guys, and I was thinking, what? Am I going to become somebody like that? No, never. I'm going to die as early as possible. And smoking actually is going to help me. And if you say, at the age of 50, I probably need to smoke even faster to, to pass out at the, like, a little bit earlier, since I don't want to live at the age of 50. And that was my worldview. And drinking, sex, whatever, all sorts of stupid things I was engaged in for 10 years, and did lots of stuff. And that's basically like, somehow this Camus and Kierkegaard and other philosophers, they actually influenced my behavior. Not, of course, personally. I never read anybody like Camus or Kierkegaard when I was 10 years old. But I read Dostoevsky. I read Leo Tolstoy. I read some people in school. Lermontov. I read Lermontov. Very pessimistic guy. And I was passionate about, well, not too much, but I liked it. So, and the whole idea, like, when you are young, when you are influenced by such worldview and people, you basically spoil your, like, you not experience what there is. You experience what other people make you believe there is. And this is the problem. And then when you grow older, of course, when you see that there's like, and the problem is like, now I tell you where the problem comes from. So you grow older and you become, like, let's say 60 years old, and you are aware, especially if you're a philosopher and if you are working on development of your language and your ideas through your entire life. So you are aware that in a few years, or maybe in a decade or in a couple of decades, you're going to pass away. And you have to prepare for that. That's the point. And philosophy basically is considered by many, it's like one of the definition of philosophy, it's a preparation for death. So if you see from a religious point of view, like there are some religions organized around this, death concept, the concept of death. And like philosophers, lots of philosophers, they basically was writing their most influential books at their uh, old age. And ideas which they put there, it was basically, okay, they tried to denounce the world. They tried to say that the world doesn't make any sense. It's cruel, it's miserable, it's better not to be alive. And it's like Schopenhauerian point of view. It's better not to be alive. It's better to die as fast as possible. And not to die as fast as possible. It's better, to create an afterworld, right? To create something like in your imagination that after your death, there is going to be something like paradise, and that's good that you go there and you leave this earth, which is like basically the hell. And but of course, when you just make up some stupid stories, doesn't affect other people as when you are the greatest philosopher like Schopenhauer, and when you just try to argue, not like when your arguments are so strong and so powerful that when you read somebody like Schopenhauer when you are 20, and Nietzsche read him when he was like 20, yeah, when he was 21, he said like 60 at 1865, I guess it was the year when he started studying Schopenhauer, and then a little bit later he wrote an essay when he said uh, which was called Schopenhauer as a teacher or as an educator or whatever. He basically dedicated the whole essay to the Schopenhauer, where he said when he said that when he was reading Schopenhauer, he was thinking as if Schopenhauer wrote exclusively for him, for Nietzsche. So he read all Schopenhauerian works as if like it was the communication between them two. So like Schopenhauer was writing for Nietzsche, Nietzsche discovered it's like a letter, and then his writings basically were like kind of other letters to other people, like me, for example. Yeah, and he was influenced by Schopenhauer, and he started like denouncing life for the first time. But then he realized at the age of 36 that it's all like maybe taken that way, but maybe taken another way. And so when you look at it, like when you're once again, when you're old, you want to leave this world, and you want to, you want to get rid of this feeling that you are going to miss something, that you are going to lose something. So you basically denounce life. You say, life is nonsense. I'm going to die, but it's not a problem since life is not worth to live it. And then you create the whole philosophy and convince yourself. It's like this is consciousness, how consciousness operates through individuals. So I'm consciousness, and I'm, let's say I'm stupid consciousness, and I believe that I am just this one individual. And then I just come to an end of my life. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm dying. And it's like, it's the end. And, it's kind of harmful experience to think about my death. Read a book by, well, actually, don't read the book. It's a silly book. I was uh, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. And I like this guy, Sheldon Solomon, and his theory of terror management theory. But the Denial of Death, I actually bought it and read the whole book. And it was not such a silly book, but it was, now it praised more, like at least by Lex Friedman, it's praised more than it deserves. You don't learn too much from it. Anyway, the whole idea of death. So you basically create a kind of imaginary world, and you try to convince yourself that it's okay to die, and it's not so bad to leave this, like to abandon this life. And that's what happens. I mean, that's, you convince yourself, but then somebody else finds your works, finds your books, and read them when he's 20, and when his life just starts. And then what may happen? He may say, what? I'm not going to live this stupid life. I'm going to die. Since he's like, if you're a great philosopher like Schopenhauer, basically, if any young mind, like, somebody who is 10 years old, will find works of Schopenhauer who can already read, who is able to read. I mean, in translation, if it's somebody who's from Russia, whatever. So if you are able to read, and if you are 10 years old and you read like not just one book, but you focus your attention and study Schopenhauer for a year, let's say, or for a couple of years. Since studying Schopenhauer includes not just studying Schopenhauerian works, but it also includes in studying philosophy. Schopenhauer mentions philosophers almost on every page. And to understand him better, you have to read at least a few other philosophers and some ancient philosophers and study some different concepts. But the idea is if you read Schopenhauerian books, like The World as Will and Representation, on the free will, on the morality, what was morality? Moral essays. There was 2 moral essays which he sent to academies, Danish academies, and what other academy? Norwegian Academy. By the way, so if you read Paregra and Paralimpomena and other essays, so you'll figure out that you may basically, when you are 10 years old, you may basically buy into this pessimism and then just destroy your life, whereas it's unnecessary. Whereas it's written for people to read at the end of their life, not at the beginning. Dostoevsky is written not most of his ideas and basically his attacks on the world and at suffering and on life itself. It's basically it's not for children, and that's the fucking irony of our existence. So that we start reading these books when we are like 7 years old in school, not in 7, when we are 10 years old. So in 5th grade, there's subject like literature, and we are supposed to read like people, the greatest writers and philosophers. No, don't read philosophers, but we read, philosophers influence novelists a lot. And in lots of novels, you'll have many philosophical thoughts. And some novels are basically like propaganda of certain philosopher. And like in Dostoevsky, it was a certain type of propaganda. Like every writing is propaganda, but in Dostoevsky, it wasn't just propaganda. It's like this moral way of living life. But in many his books, anyway, what I want to say that this is an irony of life. So you read, when you are a child, you read books written by old people, and like some of these books are written exactly by these people to prepare themselves for death. And what they want to like, the content which is in their books is basically denouncing the life. And if you read it when you are young, you have a risk to buy it and then change your life and like ruin your life basically. And the same may be true on some caricature examples when you are like an old guy, like 60 or 70 years old, and you understand that there's not so much time left, and you read some optimists and you may believe that it's all great. I mean, life, not like of course you may transcend your identity, like just say I'm pure consciousness, I'm not gonna die, like this body will die, I'm still there, experience is still there, that's okay. But there are some optimists about when people who really, I wouldn't call Nietzsche an optimist, but he basically, he did, this was very ironic. So he was at the twilight of his life, and he was praising life and saying life is amazing, life is just I love you, life. Life, you are so beautiful, you are so exciting, like there's nothing, it's such a mysterious, such a wonderful, such a spectacular thing, life, to be alive, to be to experience this world. And he was suffering. It's like it must be always taken for account that during his life, and especially at the end of his life, like last 10, 10 years, maybe 20 years, he was suffering immensely. And he was praising life and saying life is great. And life didn't, didn't give him, life didn't give him inappropriate feedback. So the more he praised life, the the harder it became for him. And eventually he just got mad and spent the last 10 years of his life in a madhouse. Not in a madhouse, but, in such a condition where he couldn't basically like do anything. And that was like how that's where his appraisement of life led him. Whereas Schopenhauer, he denounced life and always tried to say like life doesn't make any sense. It's better not be alive than be alive. And eventually he like lived to like he died at 72, but he had a very good life in general. So he was wealthy. He had servants. He had whatever he wanted to have and leisure, free time, good health. He could travel the world, but he basically was sitting in his Frankfurt on Main, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, Camus, yeah, let's read this dumb quote and finish this video for today. I guess it's enough. I was talking too much as usual, and I'm going to talk even more. Yeah, now I want to emphasize it once again. So now I do kind of, why am I so excited about these studying streams? Before, I used to record lots of self-talks. And my self-talks were basically the work on form. So I started studying English. I couldn't speak English at all. I couldn't, formulate my thoughts, not just clearly, but anyhow, there was no way to say anything meaningful. And I had lots of troubles. And so I've spent years just to work on form, since the content is still, it's always here. It had been here all the time. So when I shifted to English at the end of 2017, I already like got through 10 years of immense serious experience of studying philosophy, psychology, the self, languages, whatever. But my form was terrible, and it's still terrible. I know that, and I probably need like 10 more years to work on form to make it really brilliant and shining. But the point is that for these years, I was working basically on form. I recorded self talks, and I didn't, there was something I disliked, and it was the lack of content. So even though I was talking about books which I read, even though I was talking about some poems and my personal experience, mostly it was organized around like nothing. It's like the whole idea of developing your language, thinking about form, thinking about grammar, thinking about pronunciation, thinking about certain expressions. And now, like these studying streams, there's like I do like half of my time I focus on form, and half of my time I focus on the content, and I just read certain thinkers, I talk about them, and I really enjoy it. I mean, there's more content than form. That's why I like it more than just my, if you go, like I recorded on my channel, there are almost 1,000 videos, 1,000, which I published during the last 4 years. And on these thousands videos is basically, it's all about, it's about exercises dedicated to improve the form, to improve the quality of my language, to improve my grammar, to improve my pronunciation, to develop certain, you know, develop my style. Whereas now I'm shifting more to the content and working on it. So the last definition, the last quote by Camus: thinking is learning all over again how to see. Directing one's consciousness, making of every image a privileged place. Okay, it's not so pessimistic as I expected. It has nothing to do with pessimism at all. It's more about, thinking. It's learning all over again how to see. Directing one's consciousness, making of every image a privileged place. It's like it's the same idea of being aware of what's going on, not, you know, just paying attention to the world, not to oneself, since lots of, there are lots of stations when people are focused on their inner life, and no, I'm focused on my inner life, and it's like it's basically my inner life. It's my experience. So it's not just this personality or this ego, whatever, which just afraid of everything, or maybe too narcissistic or whatever. It's just real experience. So I'm thinking, when I'm thinking about the past, I'm thinking about what was going on, and I try to reevaluate it all the time. And it's not the same as being preoccupied with your personality and with some fears and some illusions about yourself. So I'm not thinking too much about myself. I think I'm still thinking about like events, experiences, books, sciences. Uh, yeah. And here, once again, learning all over how to see. Direct, it's like if you're a thinker, you may just engage in building some uh, what air castles, and and you wouldn't see what's going on around you. You wouldn't see life. You wouldn't see anything. You live in your image. Like you may be very like kind of an introvert, but an introvert, I guess we may interpret in different ways. But yes, you may just focus on your thoughts and don't see the reality. And Camille wants to say that directing one's consciousness, making of every image a privileged place. So whatever you see, just try to see what's going on. When you see the a person, okay, persons, birds, images. Yeah, I would definitely, definitely. I wouldn't probably agree with that, since sometimes there's so many things which completely useless, and the places, and not complete, but they are not important. You have to learn to discern between certain things which you have to pay attention to and certain things that you don't have to pay attention to. The problem is that sometimes you may become too concerned with your inner world that you won't be able to see anything outside, and this may be a problem. And then you have to direct your consciousness and make sense out of your perceptions, out of what you see, instead of being preoccupied. Yeah, you may, I guess the problem, maybe you may have some childhood trauma, or you may have some ideas which bother you, and you may, as many people have right now. So you may believe that you have not enough money, you have a job and you are underpaid, and you may complain about it all the time. Or you may believe that you're controlled by government, and that government is terrible, and everything is going on is terrible, and you may just think about it all the time without actually doing anything, and placing all your blames on something else, on the reality, on government, on other people, on your past, and your future, thinking about the past all the time, and oh, if only I had do that instead of this, I would live such a great life now, but I was such a jerk. All right, so I guess it's enough for today. Yeah, I've got through many amazing stuff, quotes. I got through definitions of consciousness, read several definitions, learned about consciousness and conscious on etymonline.com, read an article on Wikipedia, not an article, but few sentences, definition. And yeah, and also I made questions once again, many questions. Did I answer this question, one of them today? I don't know. I guess I need to check out these questions once again and see how much what I said during this studying stream relates to the questions. But anyway, it was fun. I mean, the more I do this exercise, these studying streams, the better I see how it may grow in the future. Again, there's still problems with the form. I'm aware that I need to improve my form, but this is the best way of developing the form. So you just try to use certain concepts, you talk about them more than you may think using these concepts, and that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm going to continue doing that, but for now, I guess I have to stop here. If you are watching, thank you for your attention. Subscribe to my channel, write comments if you want me study something else, or I'm not going to, of course, if you want me study some your concepts, I'm probably not going to do that. But if you're interested in those concepts which I study, or if you're interested in some philosophers whom I mentioned, or some ideas, You may always ask me some questions and I'll probably answer them. And, we may have some sorts of conversation and communication here. Yeah. And if I mentioned Eckhart Tolle in the beginning of this podcast. So if you have an opposite view, if you like Eckhart Tolle, and if you are, inspired by his ideas and by his worldview, and if you think that he is a good guy who, do lots of important things for, enlightening the people and, changing the world to become a better place, you may write me down some, again, send me some links to the videos which I may watch, and we may talk about them as well. So I don't like, even if I have some negative attitudes towards such people like Eckhart Tolle, it's negative. It's just my perception. Of course, we may have a constructive discussion on every philosopher and every scientist and every spiritual guru, uh, if it actually makes, I wouldn't say that I would talk with everybody about everything, but if you have strong arguments, yeah, that may be interesting to listen and to watch. That's all for today. Bye bye. See you later.